So the fuel starts off in the fuel storage tank. This tank is usually a welded steel construction and will require a filler neck and cap, vent to allow atmospheric pressure to act on the diesel during withdrawal, and allow for expansion and contraction of the fuel. The fuel is drawn from the tank through the use of a diaphragm lift pump driven off the engine. In between the lift pump and the tank will be a primary filter, usually a pleated paper surface type filter. It can filter out 25 microns and larger. This filter's under a vacuum due to it being on the inlet side of the diaphragm pump. A water separator can also be part of this filter. The diaphragm pump is self-regulated through the use of a spring, usually between 3 and 5 psi. And from there it is sent to the secondary filter, which is 5 microns and larger, and same design as the primary filter. Okay, so once fuel is supplied for the separate lift pump, it supplies 3 to 5 psi to the inlet of the pump here, and on the inlet is a vane type transfer pump. You can see the vanes moving in and out as I turn the rotor here. And this is regulated to 26 psi at cranking, 40 psi at idle, and 90 to 120 psi at high idle. Once the fuel has gone past that set limit, this plunger will uncover a spill port, which will send fuel back to the inlet of the transfer pump. And then after the transfer pump, fuel flows out into this annular groove right here. And off this annular groove is a calibrated vent wire, which is kind of back in the housing there. And that's a restricted orifice which will help drop the pressure into the governor housing here to 4 psi. Any pressure and air bubbles that build up on that calibrated vent wire will find their way here, and once pressure exceeds 4 psi, it'll be bled back to the fuel tank. Also off of this annular groove is the timing advance mechanism. So based off of integral transfer pump pressure, fuel will act on this plunger here, which will in turn turn the cam ring against rotor rotation to advance the beginning of injection. So from that annular groove, fuel can hit this metering valve here, and this metering valve, like the delivery of the metering valve, will be dependent on governor and operator input. So once fuel goes past the metering valve, it'll fill up this entire annular groove around the rotor here. And once the inlet port is lined up, the fuel will jump a 1 to 3 micron clearance and enter the rotor. From there, fuel will spread apart the plungers, and those plungers will only spread apart a distance equal to the amount of fuel that was metered. As the rotor continues to rotate, the rollers will ride up on the cam ring lobes, and high pressure is created. That high pressure will unseat this delivery valve, which is 350 to 500 psi to unseat. And once the outlet lines are lined up with the injection line, fuel will jump that 1 to 3 micron clearance again and will be sent out to the particular injector. So the governor uses flyweights to sense engine speed. As engine speed increases, these flyweights are spread further out, which in turn will move this link here to move the metering valve to a decreased fuel position. As engine speed decreases, like say if you put a load on, the governor will slow down and it'll let the operator request more fuel. This type of injection pump uses hydraulically operated injectors. Once fuel reaches the injectors through the inlet here, it will travel down the injector body and it will act on a needle and seat. And pressure will act on the shoulders of this needle here, And once cracking pressure is reached, which is usually between 2,500 and 5,000 psi, this needle will lift off its seat, which will open up the end of the injector and allow fuel to spray into the combustion chamber. Inside the body of this injector is a 1 to 3 machine clearance, 1 to 3 micron machine clearance that the fuel is allowed to leak past. And this leakage fuel cools and lubes the injector, and once it's done that, it returns through the outlet back to the fuel tank.